Yeah, I have a fast question about Yiddish New York. I was trying to reserve a spot for tonight and I was having
Yeah,
difficulties.
I
So if
have
anybody knows anything about that later on
no clue.
between
Just
the,
put it in the chat. Put the question in the chat, and if anyone has the
thank
answer in
you.
the chat,
Okay. What are you wearing? That's wild.
I'm
It's like,
cold.
I
It's
understand.
my coat.
Ah, it's your coat.
It's my
And
coat. It
I'm
is
wearing
pretty wild, but
I'm
it's my
wearing a
coat.
sweater. Oh, okay. All right. You look, it's fun.
Oh,
It's
good.
great.
Thank you.
Take care. Right.
Hi, Alana. Hi, Alan. Good morning, Rachel.
Rabbi Diane.
That's your daughter.
She is, so for those of you who haven't heard, she has COVID. And unfortunately, she got a double whammy because we didn't know she had COVID and she got a booster. So for a couple of days, she was pretty sick, but I think it's, one of those mild ones, but it was a little scary in the beginning.
Oh,
But she's
yeah.
definitely getting better. So thank you.
Baruch Hashem.
Rabbi Diane, Rabbi Diane, did you go to Costa Rica for a destination bar mitzvah, or does your uncle live there?
No, my family lives, I have a bunch of family in Costa Rica and all over Latin America.
When did they go?
Wow.
When did they go there? When did they go there?
I think they went in the 90s.
Wow.
So I was born in Colombia and I have relatives all over the place now, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia, and Miami, another Latin American country.
You're a real Jew, Dan.
I am a real Jew. I am a real
Ah,
Today you look like winter.
Yeah, that's because I'm cold, but I'm glad I look like winter. I'm the embodiment of winter.
no,
Okay,
you want to
everybody.
be, you're a shepherdess. That's what you
Enough
are.
about me. Let's go to let's study Torah.
Good
The
for
whole
you,
purpose,
Dan.
the whole purpose of the coat of not too many colors is so that it doesn't arouse jealousy.
Exactly, exactly.
You're a
All
true
right.
diaspora Jew. Your
What
family is a You're a true diaspora
I
Jew.
am a
Your
diaspora.
family is a diaspora.
Yes, for sure. I mean, I'll tell you more one day, but in brief, I was born in Colombia. My mother was born in Haiti, and all my grandparents come from the Middle East.
Wow.
Oh my God.
I know, crazy.
You're lucky not to be in Haiti now.
I know,
Well,
but
if it,
I grew up in Brooklyn, so in that way, I'm
well
very
that
pedestrian.
well that's it. In New York, it's the Bronx or Brooklyn. So
All right,
that's the
let's do
big
some Torah.
divide.
Let's do some Torah. Celia, can you please share with us the bracha over Torah study and give me a quick hand. Who would like to recite it this morning? Is anyone raising a hand? Because I can't see now.
I could do it.
Great.
It's Roberta. Hi.
Hi, Roberta.
If with your permission, I'd like to chant the Hasidic.
As long as it's brief, you have my permission to do anything.
Oh, well, very brief. Galena be'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Galena be'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Galena be'abita Niflaot mitoratecha. Inspired by the amazing Kabbalat Shabbat last night. Yasher Koach, all of you. Wow.
That was so beautiful, Roberta. So just to add the traditional words as another layer of blessing, Brucha at Adonai Elatenu Ruach HaOlam Asher Kiddishtanu b'mitzvoteha v'sivatnu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen, amen. I said traditional words, but then of course I changed the gender. Okay, everybody. Thank you for your good wishes for my daughter's health and healing. I do believe she'll be okay, even though it was a little scary in the beginning, as I said. But I really appreciate having all of you here with me and your tefillot, your prayers. So today we are starting the book of Exodus. So exciting. And what I wanted to do is look at the women of Exodus, and I'm going to share my screen, and their incredible bravery and courage. And it's called, today's session is called Strong Hands and Outstretched Arms, the Women of Exodus. And the reason there's a little asterisk there is that my friend and chavruta, Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld, wrote a beautiful essay about these women, which is entitled Strong Hands and Outstretched Arms just in case you want to take a look at it. It's at the end in resources in the Women's Passover Companion, Women's Reflections on the Festival of Freedom. So with this information below, you can certainly find it. Okay, and I wanted to begin with this incredible quote by Frederick Douglass, which I just, found and love and have used before in some of my teaching. And he says, "When I ran away from slavery, it was for myself. When I advocated emancipation, it was for my people. But when I stood up for the rights of women, self was out of the question, and I found a little nobility in the act." So that's, an interesting categorization of, what he did and for whom, right? So, and I know that, any categories are complicated and we could always sort of kind of mess them up. But I thought this was an interesting way to think about what we do and why we do it. So is it for yourself? Is it for your people? Or is it, something that you're doing as a completely selfless act? And as I was studying this morning with Rabbi Sharon Cohen-Anisfeld, we were talking a little bit about, like, some people think that nothing is selfless, but let's just leave that possibility open. What are the differences in how we do things and why we do things? Like, I know when I have a craving for a donut and I go get a donut, it's definitely not for anything greater than myself. I mean, there's clearly some kind of spectrum, at least an experiential spectrum for sure. So let's keep those categories in mind, and I sort of spell them out here and use them as a prism with which to approach the texts and characters below. So, and let's start with the midwives, which is a really interesting category because you'll see in the Hebrew, it doesn't really carry over into translation, but they are the Miyaldot Ha'ivriyot, the midwives either to the Hebrews or the Hebrew midwives. So they're either Egyptian and acting across enemy lines, or they're Hebrew midwives. So we're going to consider like how the narrative plays out in each case, right? Really interesting that the narrative is so fluid and almost shifty in that way. Like, how are we reading? What is this story about, after all? Okay, so Asher Chaim, can I call on you to read a little bit this morning?
I'm honored. Thank you.
Is this big enough, or should I make it bigger?
I dropped the PDF, which is wonderful, so I can enlarge it to my own delight.
Okay, I'll just make it a little bigger for people, and I'll follow along while you read the Hebrew.
So we'll go back and forth?
I mean, I'll follow along with my cursor. You can do it any way you want.
Would you like both Hebrew and English?
Yes.
Vayomer melech Mitzrayim lamiyaldot ha'ivriot. The king of Mitzrayim said to those who give birth to of the Hebrews, Asher shem ha'achat Shifra v'shem ha'shenit Pu'ah. The name of one was Shifra, and the name of the second was Pu'ah. Vayomer, and he said or commanded, Biyaledchen et ha'ivriot, when you help the Hebrew women through labor, Uriten al ha'avanayim, look at the birthing stones, Imbenhu v'hamiten oto, v'imbathi v'haya.
Okay, let's just stop for 1 second, Asher Chaim. Thank you so much. I want to give a little context about the beginning of the book of Exodus. So, while the book of Genesis is the book of Israelite barrenness and God sort of trying to create an Israelite family in the face or either in the face of that barrenness or through that barrenness, in the book of Exodus, we start off and they are, multiplying. They're being fruitful. They're multiplying. It's vayishrutzu, like they're just all over the place and spreading out. And the Pharaoh is kind of terrified at their, their growth and their girth. And so his response is to focus on birth and let's kill these Israelite babies, right? So it's already, Egypt is kind of a death cult in that way, or let's kill the Israelite male babies. Okay, sorry, I just felt like I should give that context.
Brilliant. If he is a son, you shall kill him. And if she is a daughter, she may live. Vatirena hamiyaladot et Elohim. But the midwives feared God. Velo asuk asher diber alehen melech Misraim. They did not do as had been spoken, commanded to them from the king of Egypt. But hayenna et hayeladim. They gave life to the children. Vayikra melech Misraim lamiyaldot. The king of Egypt called the midwives, vayomer lahen, and said to them, Madua asiten hadavar hazeh vathayena et hayeladim. Why did you do this thing to give life to the children? Vatomarna hamiyaldot el Paro, the midwives said to Paro, Kilo kanashim hamitzriot ha'ivriot. Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. Ki hayot hena, they're wild. Beterem tavo alehen hamiyaledet vialadu. By the time the midwife gets there, they've already given birth. Vayetev Elohim lamiyaldot, vayerev ha'am vaya'atzmu me'od. God was good to the midwives, and the nation became numerous and strong, exceedingly. Vayhi ki yar'u hamiyaldot et Elohim vaya'as lahem batim. And it was because the midwives feared God, he made for them households. Right, Sav Paro lechol amo lemor. So Pharaoh commanded all of his nation, saying, Kol haben hayilod hayaora tashlichu vechol habat tehayun. Any son who is born, you shall cast him into the Nile, but any daughter you shall cause to live.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Asher Chaim. So a few points. One is you see the word life, or the verb for life, all over this passage, right? So clearly the midwives are on the side of life. And Pharaoh is not on the side of life. And it's interesting that the Miyaldot, these midwives, who are either Egyptian or Hebrew, feared God, or they had a certain awe for God. And that doesn't seem to be embedded, at least not here, in any particular religious tradition. It's just kind of an intuitive, like, they had a sense of God, and they had a sense that God was somehow connected to not killing children, right? That life and God are interconnected. And then, okay, so then the Pharaoh is furious at them, right? Why did you leave the male children alive? Why are you on the side of life? And they say something really interesting. They said, these Hebrew women, they're not like the Egyptians. They are chayot. So they're, as Asher Chaim translated, they're like animals, or they're alive. And they give birth right before we even get there. So it's interesting. So I think the midwives are doing something here that's really sneaky and brilliant. They're playing into the Pharaoh's fears and stereotypes about the Hebrew women. They are like animals, right? They just are, they're just popping out those babies. And perhaps Pharaoh believed them because he's engaging Pharaoh's own biases and fears and stereotypes. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say about that. I want to look at two pieces of commentary, and then we'll open up the conversation for a few comments. So I like what Zornberg says here, Aviva Zornberg. The very extremity of the edict forces a new moral vision upon the midwives, a radical choice between life and death. Disobedience to Pharaoh becomes more than merely a refusal to kill, becomes a total dedication to nourishing life. And as I was reading this, and this came up in my chavruta this morning with Rabbi Sharon, I kind of read this first sentence a little bit differently. The very extremity of our times forces a new moral vision upon us. I think about that a lot. Like what are we called upon to do by the extremity of this moment, right? The extraordinary nature of these times. And then finally, the commentator Abarbanel, he claims they were not Hebrews, lo hayu ivriot. Since how could Pharaoh's mind be confident that Hebrew women would murder their own people's babies? Rather, they are the midwives of the Hebrews. They assist the Hebrew women in the birthing process, just as the next verse says, when you deliver the Hebrew women. And in fact, the tradition tells us that they converted to Judaism. These Egyptian midwives were so inspired by the Hebrews and by the Hebrew women that they converted to Judaism. So that's kind of interesting as well. Okay, so that's that story. That's our opening story, our opening gambit. I will stop my share and see if there are any comments. And if not, we can just go to the next story. I see there are 13 comments I missed in the chat. Let's see. Yay for wild chayot. Love that. Midwives are from the same tribe as Pharaoh's daughter, choosing life, giving over life alienating systems. Love that. Okay, Asher Chaim and Richard. Let's have some quick comments so we can get a lot more text.
I hesitate to throw a grenade into the discussion, but I've spent the last 5 or 6 years trying to understand those who really radically differ with me, to find hakarat hatov even for the former president. And here, the extreme, ferocious devotion to preserving life is unfortunately one of the touchstones of the other in the political debate, because there are abortions that are not only permitted but commanded by halacha. And on the other side, there are those who are so radically committed to the life of the fetus, even if they really don't care about the already living, that becomes the absolute. And when it becomes the absolute, it becomes almost an idolatry. But in a crazy way, they're coming from the same place as the midwives. And there has to be some hakarat hatov of those with whom I ferociously disagree.
So what a complicated point of view you're articulating. And I'm actually often tortured by a certain approach that I would like to kind of get rid of, that I have to the world, but I can't. I mean, everybody has a perspective, even the most evil person. And I feel like you could actually sympathize with somebody or try to understand them while rejecting their ethics and their acts strenuously and clearly. So it's a very complicated line to walk. And on the other hand, I feel like even politically, it's really important to understand the other side, right?
The
Whether
word
that
you used last week was humanizing the one with whom we disagree.
Which,
In a different context, the verb you used was humanize, which really landed with me.
Last week?
Regarding Joseph. Regarding Joseph, not that you were rehabilitating him, but humanizing him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the beauty of theater and drama, of literature. You can understand anybody. And in fact, I read that Robert De Niro, in an article in the New York Times, was saying, the art of acting or of drama gave him the ability to play anybody. And then the interviewer said, well, would you play Trump? And he said, no. Like the art of drama gave him the ability to empathize with anybody in the world, but he didn't want to go there. So that was really interesting too. So thank you for that courageous comment, Asher Chaim. Okay, Richard.
I don't have a comment, but a question. The word translated as fear, you also use the word awe.
Yeah, it's your
Does it have other meanings, because fear just strikes me as, well, wrong maybe in a
I agree.
passage about
I agree.
life.
I agree. I think I like the translation of awe for yirah in most contexts. But if anyone else has more information about that particular word, drop into the chat.
Okay, thank you.
It's often translated as fear when I think it should be awe, and I guess that just came to me reflexively. Okay, Abby, and then Alana, and then maybe we'll go do some more text, look at the birth of Moses. You have to unmute yourself.
One of the commentaries that I read and I studied with my Haverta partner was about how these women were giving birth to like sextuplets at a time, and all of them lived. And it just felt like Hashem's hand was in this.
Beautiful. What a great image. Sextuplets. Yes.
And the other piece has to do with xenophobia, that it was really about the fear of the other, fear of the immigrants.
Yeah.
Coming in, and that it's just a statement of our time as well.
Yes, absolutely. Fear of the other. Yeah, including those, as Asher Chaim said, that we so strenuously disagree with and maybe feel threatened by for good reasons, right? People who are vaccinated feel threatened by people who are not vaccinated. People who are against guns feel threatened by people who have. I mean, it's right. The fears feel legitimate and well-grounded. So, yeah, complicated.
Thank you.
Alana.
Boker Tov, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So Jay put this in the chat, but I was wondering about it too. This calling Pharaoh the king, not Pharaoh. What is that? Is that new, different? How do we understand that? Was there a change in leadership?
Well, yeah, it says in the beginning of Exodus that a new king rose up that did not know Joseph. I think it says new. Does it say new?
I think it does, but it says
does.
king, not Pharaoh.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interchangeable, and I don't really have any other insight about that. So again, opening up that question to any of you who want to comment. But yeah, I think it's a kind of interchangeable thing as far as I understand. Let's see. Okay. No other comments? All right. We're going back to our text. Let's see. Okay. So now, another extraordinary story with women, about women who save life. So just, one comment before we do that, given Frederick Douglass's categories, right? It's so interesting because depending how you define these midwives, if they're Hebrew midwives, they're acting on behalf of their people. And if they're Egyptian midwives, then they're crossing ethnic lines. And it seems like less about themselves and more about a complete commitment and devotion to life and God. And I'm not putting down either one. It just seems like a different approach. Okay, so now let's do the story of the birth of Moses. So, Vayelech ish mi beit Levi, vayikach et bat Levi. So some guy from the house of Levi went and took a daughter of Levi. And you'll notice in this text that there are no names for anybody until we get to the name of Moses, and you have to wait a little bit for that. But tahar ha'isha, so the woman gives birth in the face of Pharaoh's edicts to throw all baby boys or Israelite baby boys into the river. Vateled ben, vatere oto ki tovhu, vatitzpenehu shlosha yirachim. So the woman got pregnant, and she had a son, and she saw that he was good. And it's very interesting because this is often translated as, she saw that he was beautiful, or she saw that he was handsome. But literally it's, she saw that he was good, and she hid him 3 months. So here's the question. Would she not hide him if she didn't see he was good? Like, what does this mean? So we hear, this very clear resonance to the book of Genesis, the beginning of the book of Genesis and the creation of the world. And it says there, just to take one example, in the first chapter of Genesis, verse 6, Vayikra Elohim layabasha eretz l'mikvei hamayim kara yamim vayar Elohim ki tov. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of waters he called seas, and God saw that this was good. So again and again in Genesis, God sees that it is good or very good. And here, the mother of Moses sees that the baby is good. So it's kind of a literary code to tell us the world is being created anew. And if Genesis is the story of the creation of the world and the creation of the Israelite family, Exodus is the story of the creation of the nation of Israel through emerging from slavery and liberation. Okay, so she hides the baby 3 months, and one could imagine that his cries were getting louder at that point, becoming too big for the closet, or I don't know, wherever they put him to hide him. The lo yachla od hatspino, they could no longer hide him. Vatikach lo tevat gome, vatachmara bechemar uvezafet, vatasem ba et hayeled, vatasem basuf al sfat hayeor. It says when she could hide him no longer, she got an ark of papyrus, and she loamed it with loam and would put pitch. I don't know what loam is, but then she put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And remember that the Israelite people would ultimately pass through the sea of reeds. So there's that literary connection. And then there's also the teva, which is a very unusual word in biblical literature. I meant to look at exactly how many times it was appeared. I thought it was 2. Asher Chaim is helping me here and saying 2. Here and in the story of Noah and the ark. So what we're right here. So what we're being coded here, another literary code. So not only is this story a story of creation, but it's a story of salvation, right? The Israelite people will be saved. Okay. So let's see what happens. And I see Nehemiah wants to talk. So we're going to get to the end of the story, and then I will open up the conversation. Okay, so first of all, I just want to remark on the extraordinary courage and maybe kind of mysterious faith that the mother of Moses had to place her baby, not in the Nile, but on the banks of the Nile. Like, what was she thinking? I have no idea what was she thinking. Maybe she asked her older daughter to watch the child. I don't know, but there's no indication of that. So the mother releases the baby into like the hands of the universe somehow. And here's what happened. Vatetatsav achoto merachok. So Miriam stands or I shouldn't call Miriam yet because she's unnamed in the Torah. So his sister stands at a distance. And in my chavruta this morning, Rabbi Sharon reminded me that there's something about standing and this form of the verb to stand that is very active, right? And it's also connected to Nitzavim in the book of Deuteronomy, that the Israelite people stood at Sinai and stood also to hear Moses' instructions. And then here's an extraordinary word because of the form of the verb. So she stood at a distance, l'de'ah. So for knowledge, not to know the verb, but for knowledge. She's like waiting for some revelation, right? Ma ye'asela, what is to happen to him? So she's in this receptive and yet active mode, right? Just ready to act, but not knowing what's going to unfold. And I think it takes, and I see this all the time in myself and family work, it takes great strength not to act immediately. It takes great strength often to just kind of watch and see what emerges and wait for the right moment to step in when you could be more effective as opposed to less reactive and less effective because you are more reactive. ותרד בת פרעה לרחוץ על היאור, ונערותיה הולכות על יד היאור, ותראה את התיבה בתוך הסוף, ותשלח את אמתה, ותיקחיה. So Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, came to bathe in the Nile, or in the river, and her maidens are also going along with her. By the banks of the Nile, and she sees the ark, the little basket, in the reeds, and she sends her maiden, perhaps, to fetch it. Now, amata is really interesting because it can be her hand or it can be her maiden. So let me just look at this briefly for a minute. So here's this beautiful midrash that Rashi, the 11th century French commentator, has excerpted in his commentary. Et amata, et shifchata. So amata, the plain sense of the word means, her handmaiden, or her, I don't know, one of her girls. I don't exactly know how to translate that. But the rabbis explained it in the sense of hand in the Talmud of Sota 12b. And according to the grammar of the Holy Language, it should then have been written amata, with a vocalized differently with a little dot in the mem, dagesh. And the reason why they explained et amata to mean et yada, her hand, she stretched forth her hand, is because they hold that Scripture intentionally uses this term to indicate that her hand increased in length several cubits in order that she might more easily reach the cradle. So, I love this image. And again, in my Chavrita with Sharon, we were talking about, like, when are you able to stretch beyond yourselves? When is your, and what gives you the strength to stretch beyond yourself? This image of stretching at this moment in the narrative is so wonderful. Okay, so now let's go back to where we were. Vatiftach v'tirehu et hayeled, and she opened up the basket and she sees the boy. V'hinei na'ar bocha, and here's a child crying. Vatichmol olav, and she had pity over the child. Vatomer, and she said, Miyaldei ha'ivrim zeh, from the children or the boys of the Hebrews, this is. And presumably she knew who it was, because who else would be in a basket by the side of the Nile? Vatomer achoto. Okay, so now here's where Miriam steps in. Here's the exquisite sense of timing that she has. Vatomer achoto. So his sister says to El Bat Paro, to the daughter of Pharaoh, Ha'elech v'karati lach isha meineket min ha'ivriot. Shall I go and call a nursing woman from the Hebrews? So Miriam, in I think every narrative, and I could illustrate this if we were doing a whole session on Miriam, is the great reconnector. And here she's reconnecting, the child who has been purportedly abandoned, although not really, by his mother, with his mother. Vateinik lach et hayeled. And, she will nurse for you the child. Vatomer la bat Paro, and the daughter of Pharaoh says to her, L'chi vatelech ha'alma, l'chi, and go. Vatelech, and the young, maiden goes. Vatikra et em hayalad, and calls the mother of the boy. And note the doubling of the verb to go, just as it was for Abraham and lech lecha, right, to go. And also for Rebecca, that verb was that going forth. That verb is also doubled. V'tomer la bat Paro, and the daughter of Pharaoh said to her, Helichi et hayeled hazeh. So she's now talking to the mother of Moses. Vehenikehu li, and nurse him for me. Va'ani eten et scharech, and I will give you your wages. Vatikach ha'isha hayeled vatinikehu. And the woman took the boy. I guess it's only a woman from the point of view of the daughter of Pharaoh, and nursed him. We know it's the mother. But it's interesting because now this female Hebrew slave, and we've discussed this in some of our classes in Beit Midrash, is going to get paid for nursing her own child, right? Talk about a sort of, foreshadowing of redemption that we haven't even reached to this day. The work of nurturing one's child is being valued. Okay. All right, I'm going to open things up. Okay, so I'm going to go first to Sharon, and then Nehemiah, Jay, and Paul, and oh my God, we've got a big lineup. All right, Celia, if you're hearing me, can you help me remember the lineup? Okay, I said Sharon, Jay, Paul. Oh no, sorry. Sharon, Nehemiah, Jay, Paul, Barbara, Alana, Elliot, Roberta, and Saratova. Okay, everybody, please, quick comments so we can get through some more wonderful texts. Okay.
Shabbat shalom. Thanks. Oh my gosh, so much here. I just wanted to go back for a second to that moment of stretching and Bat Paro stretching. And it just struck me as we were, as you were talking about it now, that it really connects in a beautiful way to your beautiful drash from last night about turning towards seeing and sort of divine human partnership. Because the first thing that happens is Bat Paro sees the child and has compassion, right? And then sort of God, so to speak, the divine meets her and helps her stretch farther than maybe she would have thought possible across all those lines that, people are talking, the national and religious and class. And there's that seeing and then turning towards and then being met in a way that helps you stretch.
Oh, that's so beautiful. So beautiful. And yes, I forgot to mention that this baby's life is saved through women who are meeting across enemy lines. But I love that idea that the seeing and the compassion sort of gives rise to kind of a small miracle in the ability of stretching, right? Stretching beyond your usual limitations. Thank you. Okay, Nehemiah.
Okay, I want to continue the line of listening to the other side or connecting, because the Bat Paro reached with her hand to take somebody from the other side.
Yeah.
And Miriam offered her son, a brother, to the other side to be grown up. And the rabbis also, they listen to each other, and we listen to different opinions. But when it comes to politics, next, we don't hear each other. We are all in an echo chamber. Not just us, not just them. We, three groups. Progressive, which I was born into, my father established a party, was one of them. And the other side, which speak more about freedom, and then the libertarians, and nobody listened to each other. So I want to tell you some news that I found for 2 years of listening to both sides. The prophets of truth these days are the scientists, thousands and thousands, many of them are libertarian, that understand the situation with COVID and with the vaccine better than all those who are paid for the science and for the press by the big money.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Nehemiah. And that's a very strong point about how we're all in our echo chambers. Okay, Jay.
Shabbat Shalom. This issue of stretching. First, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on what Rabbi Anisfeld said in terms of the role of seeing the divine. That happened with the midwives, right? The awe that they felt is what enabled them to stretch. And also tying in Douglas, we've got the man and the woman of Levi. We've got the mother, the sister, the Pharaoh's daughter, the slave woman. A lack of names. And so maybe that's also required to be able to stretch that, names mean so much in our tradition, and the ability to let go of your name and be in a place where your almost name doesn't matter could also be an interesting process of stretching.
Yeah, and name maybe as a stand-in for status and power and reputation. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Yeah, and there's something about these stories which actually reminds me, feel like they build up to the burning bush, because each character kind of gets the power of life and of a living being, right? It's like they really see, right? Just like Moses turns to see. Okay, Paul.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I love your jacket, by the way.
Thank you.
I am struck by the astounding coincidence of us reading this story on Christmas Day.
Ah, why is that a coincidence? I'm missing it.
Well, the structural and metaphorical similarities between the birth, the environment that is described that precedes the birth of Moses is very similar in my reading of the Gospels to the environment that preceded the birth of Jesus. We have an oppressive empire.
Nice.
That is imposing mortal burdens. In the Jesus story, it's merely taxation, but it feels mortal. Jesus is born into a manger, which from a visual and structural perspective is very similar to a boat that's waterproof by pitch and bitumen. And we are feeling these events in precedence of a savior, which obviously is the essence of the Christmas story. So, to me, we are reading not just a story of the birth of the Jewish people as they transmit from Egypt to Israel, but we're looking at a metaphorical rationale for the birth of Christianity as well. It's astoundingly important.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It's interesting because I grew up going to a modern Orthodox yeshiva, and in my senior year of high school, we actually had a course. It was an entire year course about why Christianity was wrong. And I know, some people here might be uncomfortable about some, literary comparisons or, theological or thematic comparisons. And I find the connections, powerful. I find them powerful. So I appreciate those connections. Thank you. Okay, Barbara. I hope I have the lineup correctly. I'm just going in the order of the boxes now.
Of the line, right? Shabbat Shalom. Wow, such incredible stuff, Paul. Oh my God. Yes. It's such an incredible connection. What I was going to just say very briefly. So, and we know they're all they're all these women actors, and I think that sometimes we can make change by going under the radar. In other words, not being in front of the power, which was the Pharaoh and all the people going and killing the children, but to actually kind of no name, not be seen. We go under because maybe people aren't really seeing women, if women aren't valued, if women don't have as much agency within, let's say, the Egyptian culture. I don't know that much about it. That becomes the time when you can just, nobody will notice and just get that thing done. And so
yeah, and that relates to Jay's point also beautifully, like the no name moments.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And I just the fact that we're discussing this today, yes, to me is you know, very, very relevant around, you know, the birth of a whole movement that, you know, also reflects on trying to do good things, whether we agree with what they've done or not.
Yeah, thank
So,
you, Barbara. Yeah, we certainly need like the birth of a movement now uh, on the side of life, right? Not so much partisan, but like, you know, on the side of life and away from the death cult. But that's my own feeling. Okay.
yes, agreed.
Alana, Elliot, Roberta, Sarah, Tova, another Alana, and I think I saw Aluma had her hand up as well. And then that's it. We're closing because I want to get to a few more texts if we can. So, yeah.
So, Boker Tov, I wanted to also go back to that paragraph where we learn about the woman. She's not even described as a mother, but presumably Yocheved, putting her good son into the basket of papyrus. And for me, it feels like this is within the tradition in Torah of the mothers having this sense of this visionary sense of the calling of their children, because she puts him in papyrus. Moshe, who is going to receive the written and the oral Torah, is put on papyrus, which is what we write on. So there's a way in which he's put into the river with his essential calling, which is to bring, I know in Hasidut that it's talked about how he's bringing the word out of exile. Whether it's an exile or not, it's his calling to bring forth Torah. And she has this essence of this visionary sense in this pared down mythic paragraph that's how she launches him into his life, is on papyrus.
Beautiful. And as Margot pointed out in the chat, the rabbis also take the word teva, ark, and translate it as word. So he's actually being saved by the very thing that he ultimately gifts the Israelites with, which is the word. Okay, Elliot.
Shabbat shalom, everybody. So what I'm wondering is sort of like, where's Miriam? And by that I mean, at the beginning of this, what we just read, she's stationed far off, right? And yet, so if she's far off, how does she know, okay, that Pharaoh's daughter has taken pity on her brother? If she's close enough to know, okay, that, you know, she overhears, how does she get so close to this royal party?
That's a great question. We need some like clear staging directions here. Where exactly is she? So I imagine, let's try this on. She's like 10 feet away behind a tree, and they walk kind of, I don't know. I'm just imagining like a scenario that would work. And they walk kind of by her, and she's somehow can see what's happening, even if she doesn't hear the exact word.
Knei suf. The suf, the garment.
The reeds. So she's standing.
Yeah. This is what
she's hiding in the reeds.
Yeah.
But Ellie, it's a good question. We'll have to use our imaginations.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's any commentary on that, and sort of how does she get to approach them? I mean,
yeah.
How did they react to her? Anyway, I don't know if there's any commentary.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there's midrash on that. I haven't seen anything, but I'm happy to look. But you know, it reminds me, and I've said this before, she appears at the very moment to come up with a solution for a problem that the daughter of Pharaoh hasn't even articulated yet. And I know, like, you know, I've said this before, that like in work situations, like a prevailing wisdom is like you approach your boss not with the problem, but with the problem and the solution. Because if you just come to complain about the problem, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you see the problem, you come with the solution, right? That's like incredible strategy. So, but good question. I'll see what I can dig up midrash. Okay, Roberta.
Yeah, Shabbat Shalom. I'm so happy and excited that we're all just discovering these themes of non-duality. We're going beyond enemy images in the way we're looking at Torah. And I've been thinking about your Josh from last night, Rabbi Diane, and that question you asked, why is it that Moshe saw the burning bush? And I'm looking at what you just said about Pharaoh's daughter. I mean, who is probably the woman who brought him up. And, our tradition has really, there's a part of our tradition that really denies the beauty in other people's, and that the light is everywhere, and that we can be the ones who stop to see the burning bush when we really bring in all of the influences on us. Like that's what can make us great as a people, I think, because we've lived in this diaspora forever, and so I think what we're doing in Romemu and in this open book is bringing that down. And I think, it's giving me hope.
Oh, I love that. Torah study is political activism. I love it. That's fabulous, Roberta. Thank you. Okay, Sarah Tova.
Hi there, Shabbat Shalom. Just in the concept of names and kind of tagging on to what Roberta said, we know that Miriam and Yocheved, we know their names. Those were their Hebrew names. We never know what Moshe's Hebrew name was, and he's known by his Egyptian name. So that is exactly what Roberta is saying. We're taking that otherness including it in us. So it's Moshe, we don't know what Moshe was. What did his mother name him? Yeah. We'll never know. And that's the point, I think. And then I looked up, and later in the Parsha, when we meet Yitro, and I thought, they call him so many different names.
Yes.
And I looked up
El Chovav. Yes, right.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh. So there's definitely a theme on names and so much more that I
Yeah.
But yes, Moshe is his Egyptian and only name.
Yeah. We're going to look at a midrash in a moment that says that reflects on exactly the point you're making. So hold on, we're going to get there. Okay, Alana, and then I think Luma, and a couple more texts and a poem to close with.
Wow. Shabbat Shalom. I'm really thinking a lot about all the birthing narrative, and I wrote this in the chat of just sort of like Moses's story being a metaphor for the birth of the nation, his own birthing story, and then the nation being birthed, and kind of like through each so many levels of that. And also, I like the read that's sort of being proposed as this is a radical and radical feminist reading, that like actually under here is a radical way of seeing a different way of leadership that tends to be maybe a womanly way, but isn't necessarily gendered, right? Like it doesn't have to be that. And as somebody who's had 3 births with midwives, that sort of narrative in that different way, and what Roberta just said of like bringing the baby down, and waiting for the right time, and like your body kind of knowing, and so that like intuition of being there, and that and like stretching, right? So like you literally stretch your body as you birth something, and that a tremendous power there, that is a power of love, and it's like this force of nature that's not, I mean, really thinking of that difference between like I think in this nonviolent way of like the ease of birthing something that's very powerful and transformative and stretching and growing and includes everybody, versus like the standing and the powerful. And I think you can be out front with that, but if we like allow it to be out front in that way, that like the bush was always burning, but we didn't notice. So like this power is always there, but you're not necessarily seeing it until you start to just shift your attention toward that thing that might not draw you in the same way.
Wow. Whoa. So I want to say, Alana, that, what you're saying calls to mind the fact that this entire narrative is a birth story, because the children of Israel will go through, a split river and come out on the other side to become a people. And so we can think about this whole narrative as God's birth right? And God stretching and opening with the help of all these human actors who are kind of midwives, and the plagues as birth pangs. So
Yeah, and I would just say that my first child was born during the parsha where they are passing through the water, and that was like so powerful for me of like just that, to have that kind of synchronicity with that,
beautiful,
and seeing
beautiful.
that. So, yeah.
Thank you. All right, so Aluma was up, and remember I said no more comments, so I'm not sure we're gonna have time for more comments. Jill and Elliot, let's see. But and I think we can go 5 minutes over. Celia, that's sort of been the practice, if that's okay with you.
Yes, I'll just stop the live stream and you can all continue your conversation. No problem.
At 9:45. Okay. Okay. So Aluma, are you there? Did you want to?
I'm here.
Okay.
There's so much here that it's kind of hard to focus on any one thing.
Yeah.
But what I'm really drawn to from the very beginning was the fact of the Frederick Douglass tape quote, but then connected to Aviva Zornberg's, the whole idea of extremities, because birth is really nothing other than extremity of the mother. It's this constellation that's coming from the mother. And I'm just seeing the stretch and the idea of extremities so vitally important in the Exodus story. Everything is coming from something else, and it's coming from the center, which is stretching out a limb, a foot, a thought, a way of standing, a way of being. So much just depends on the way our extremities are used and how we push them forward.
Wow. It gives me a little bit, what you're saying gives me a little bit of hope. You know, it feels like we're living in extreme times, and maybe that extremity is here to birth something new. I don't usually think like that, so it's even weird coming out of my mouth. But but who knows? I want to leave some room for hope. So we're going to look at one or two more texts, and we'll see if we can get to the people who still want to speak. But let's just do that first. Let's see. Okay, so I wanted to get to the naming thing because I think that's such a beautiful. Oh, yeah. Okay, so yeah, we did that. Okay, so this is we're going forth in the story in the Torah. Vayigdal hayeled, and the child grew up. Vativi ehu levat paro. So the mother brought her son to the daughter of Pharaoh. Vayehi lah leven, and she was for him a son. What a beautiful account of adoption and sad at the same time. Vatikra shemo Moshe, and she called his name Moshe, as Sarah Tova was saying. Yeah, we don't. What name did his mother give him? Vatomer kimin hamayim mishitihu, because from the water I drew him, or I drew him out of the water, as Moses, in a sense, would draw his people from the water. Now let's see what God says about Moses' name. I'm just going to read this one in English. The Holy One said to Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh. So you see the rabbis give the daughter of Pharaoh a name even though she is unnamed in the Torah. Or I think she might be named in Chronicles, right, Asher Chaim? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Moses was not your son, and yet you called him your son. So too you are not my daughter, but I call you my daughter. Oh, this makes me want to cry. Moses was known by 10 names, not in the Torah, but in rabbinic literature, as far as I know, unless it's also in Chronicles. Asher Chaim? You don't know. Okay. Jared or Yered, Chever, Yekutiel, Avidor, Avisocho, Avizanoch, Tuvia, Shmaya, Levi, and Moses, which makes 10. But what does God say? The Holy One said to Moses, behold, from among all the names from which you are known, I only refer to you by the name that Batya, Pharaoh's daughter, named you. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's such an incredible idea. And there's another wonderful Midwives that we're not getting to, but I'm going to invite you to read it. It's from the Talmud Sota 12a, and it's an incredible story about how Miriam confronts her father, and she's really on the side of hope and life. She's like another woman who's on the side of hope and life. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share for a minute, take 2 quick comments, and then end with a poem. Okay, Eliu and Jill, but really brief, please, because now we're kind of out of time.
Hello, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I want to say that it's not so easy to integrate the order. We can integrate the little order, but the great order, as Lacan says, it's impossible to integrate.
Wait, I'm sorry, Eliu, I heard it's not so easy to integrate the other, but then
Yes.
say the other point
Because you can integrate the little order, not the great order. The great order is so powerful that it's impossible to integrate. God, the great order, the face, as Levina says, it's impossible to integrate.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And maybe that's connected to you can't see God's face and live because it's too.
Yes.
We can't face that, absolute magnificent other and still remain human. And even like this practice of understanding the other is a difficult one to engage in. And, I'm not sure when is the time for understanding and sympathizing and when is the time for fighting back because, some of our values are being threatened. It's very complicated questions. Jill.
Thank you.
I just wanted to share along with the theme of today about kind of seeing the burning bush because it's always been there. And the same thing with Batya seeing this baby. And anyway, so one of my favorite songs, I'll just sing a couple lines from it. One step down, there's a song on low, and your mind just picked up on the sound. Now you know, now you know.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Thank you. Did you? Oh, and you put that in the chat. Wow.
Nora Jones. I did actually poetry workshop, and I used that as explaining how my muse works. So
wow.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Whoa.
Yes.
All right, we are going to, wow. I'm kind of just blown away by everybody today. It just felt like, we said the bracha over sacred wisdom and words of Torah, and I really heard revelation today. So thank you.
You bring out the best in us. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you, Jill. All right, we're going to end with a beautiful poem by Abraham Isaac Cook, read by my chavruta, Sharon Konanesfeld. Hold on. Okay, and this echoes the beginning with Frederick Douglass's quote. And with that, we will say goodbye and Shabbat Shalom. Hit it, Sharon.
Okay.
And feel free to play with the gender or not, whatever way you want to do that.
There is a person who sings the song of the self. He finds everything, his complete spiritual satisfaction within himself. And there is a person who sings the song of the nation. She steps forward from her private self, which she finds narrow and insufficiently developed. She yearns for the heights. She clings with a sensitive love to the entirety of the Jewish nation and sings with it its song. She shares in its pains, is joyful in its hopes, speaks with exalted and pure thoughts regarding its past and its future, investigates its inner spiritual nature with love and a wise heart. There is a person whose soul is so broad that it expands beyond the border of Israel. It sings the song of humanity. Its soul constantly grows broader with the exalted totality of humanity and its glorious image. He yearns for humanity's general enlightenment. He looks forward to its supernal perfection. From this source of life, he draws all of his thoughts and insights, his ideals and visions. And there is a person who rises even higher, until she unites with all existence, with all creatures and with all worlds. And with all of them, she sings. This is the person who, engaged in the chapter of song every day, is assured that she is the child of the world to come. And there is a person who rises with all these songs together in one ensemble, so that they all give forth their voices. They all sing their songs sweetly. Each supplies its fellow with fullness and life, the voice of happiness and joy, the voice of rejoicing and tunefulness, the voice of merriment and the voice of holiness. The song of the soul, the song of the nation, the song of humanity, the song of the world, they all mix together with this person in every moment and at all times.
Thank you. That was so beautiful and kind of a perfect wrap up to our conversation. I don't think I have to say another thing except for Shabbat Shalom. And